by message, and literally put a yellow sticky of what that message is saying on the map of his region so he can sort of collate where the problem is being projected from. Fourth, we require an incident and type tag in all of our alerts so that we're able to filter, and that's a key aspect. We've got event codes that allow an operator to see only those type of events he needs to know about. The fire guys want to know about fire stuff. The EMS guys want to know about things that relate to them. Sure, they can turn on the other feeds if they want, but do they want to have them wake them up at night, for example? And that filterability is a key aspect to the MESIS construct. And finally, I think a key aspect that's been a key factor to our success has been the national recognition and endorsement by federal and provincial authorities in terms of documents like this. This is the Canadian Interoperability Strategy for Interoperable Communications. And if you look out of the booth, I have a copy of the action plan as well. And it actually specifies MESIS as an identified solution to national interoperability for emergency managers. Big help when I'm trying to get funding for projects that I can point to something like that, believe me. I won't say much more about the chronology, just a snapshot to show the time frame. As I mentioned, the first inklings of this started as proof of concept studies in the 2007 time frame, and it's just really taken off in the last couple of years. The national initiative, what we call the MESIS National Implementation, really took off about 2 years ago when the Center for Security Sciences came on board, and we basically re-engineered the tool, went to the open source, went from a peer-to-peer to a data aggregation hub concept, and we've been operational, what I call initial operation capability since the 4th of November of 2011. And in the last 5 months, I think we're up to 225 agencies that are now registered and developing their standard operating procedures for use of MESIS. There's the documentation I mentioned. You can go to the website, Public Safety Canada, and you'll see that MESIS is identified as a national priority. Again, as an R&D funding agency, that goes miles for me even trying to prioritize projects that support that sort of top-down endorsement. The Beyond the Borders action plan that was signed recently also specifically, and that's an excerpt from it, identifies harmonization of the Canadian MESIS system with the United States Integrated Public Alerting and Warning System to enable sharing. So we've got strong support, and MESIS is here to stay. Even though we are an S&T organization, we've got strong commitment to maintain the operational capability as we seek a smooth transition into what will become a self-sustainable business model. We've done studies in the last little while looking like very likely we'll be going to some sort of a not-for-profit that will run the MESIS operation in the near future. So now drilling into how MESIS works, I see I'm at the 27-minute mark. That's good. Quite simply, MESIS is a data aggregation service, mainly written in JavaScript, and like I said, I like to refer to it as a bucket. In fact, there are 3 buckets. Oops, this thing is touchy. There are 3 buckets. One for the operational live feeds. This is what is actually happening now, and that's only populated by authoritative sources of information. There are automated feeds, as I mentioned before, such as earthquakes and weather, but individual responders that have gone through the process to identify their standard operating procedure to us and self-declare themselves operational are feeding feeds into that operational hub. If you come by the booth, I can pull it up on the screen and you'll be able to see the snapshot of what's happening in Canada right now. We have the weather radar, the obvious things like that. We now also have solar flare alerts that are coming in as well. And I'll run through some of those a little bit later. The other hubs are the exercise hub and the training hub. These are for what they sound like they are. Operational 24/7 and supported 24/7 through a technical support team. As the slide shows there, it's all about whether you use your tools or the tools we provide. The key is the API that gets you into the hub, and that's really the magic of it, if I can say it's magic. So, after having toured a large number of federal and provincial op centers, I can say with confidence that greater than 90% of information exchange during a crisis still occurs through email, fax, and phone call, with email carrying by far the majority of content. One of my roles in Ottawa is the Science Advisor to the Government Operations Centre at Public Safety Canada. And while I was there in support of Vancouver, the G8, G20 Summit, and most recently with the Fukushima incident, I marveled at the massive amount of email distribution lists with their 3 or 4 attached PDFs that are being fed out to decision makers who try to look at it through their 2-inch screens on their Blackberries. And as I mentioned, one of the biggest challenges our provincial ops centers have during flood season, for example, or any major event, is the urgent emails that are flooding into their inboxes. So if you consider email, other than the minimal structured content in the header with the name and the date, the bulk of the key information you really want is in the unstructured body of the message, in many cases in the attachment. So this makes filtering impossible. So the focus for MACES has been the rigorous employment of structured messaging through CAP and ATOM message formats. These message standards provide an envelope for various types of documents and structured information. We can attach video clips, audio clips, we can attach whatever form of documentation you like. But the key is getting those labels right so that you can filter those documents that you want, and you draw your attention to incidents at the severity level and the region of interest to you. For those of you that are not familiar with CAP, it's an international standard from OASIS, the Organization for the Advancement of Structured Information Standards. OASIS is also responsible for the Emergency Data Exchange Language, or the EDXL messages. The Canadian profile for CAP is unique in that it mandates inclusion of event and location codes, an idea that we see other nations considering adoption. CAP-CP also limits each CAP alert to only one event type, again with the benefit being more effective filterability of alerts. Another message format we use is ATOM Geo RSS. This is a fairly universal known publishing standard for web content such as news feeds, and the Geo RSS provides the geographic context. And then, because I know there's some CAP experts in the room, I apologize if I don't get that nuance about the CAP-CP perfectly right, but I do believe that there's some unique aspects to it. In fact, I know that next week in Montreal there is a conference in Montreal comparing notes. I think there are up to 12 to 14 countries that are now looking at implementing CAP. So what's key about CAP is the structure really works well for managing crisis information. In particular, it's remarkable how effective the tags of urgency, severity, and certainty combined with event type can be useful to helping organizations organize their incident-relevant information. If you take the example of a hurricane, as the hurricane moves up the coast, we progressively adjust the certainty it will track over a particular area, the severity estimate based on whether it will cross warm water or come onto land, and the urgency depending on the timeline for which it is estimated to arrive. So this construct works very well for all alerts that we've encountered. We've even tried it recently and have actually implemented it now for solar flares. And sure enough, the three categories of qualifying a solar flare alert work wonderfully. One of the most convenient features a structured alert message like CAP provides is the ability to automate message generation. In Canada, Alberta is one of the lead emergency management agencies in the country at automating alert messages. In this slide, you'll see that a generic message at the top here can be composed to accommodate a very large variety of alerts by simply plugging in the CAP fields to generate the body of the message shown below. And it works well for performing small message formats as well, so that you could feed this into, say, Twitter or cell phone text messaging, for example. Last but not least, and particularly for a country like Canada that has 2 official languages and up to 4 in the northern regions with various First Nations, is the ability for CAP translation tables to facilitate the automated alerting to happen in multiple languages at the same time. In fact, the province of New Brunswick has implemented a simple tool that has the fields preloaded so that by entering a message in one language, you automatically populate the corresponding language for the message at the same time and issue them out. I mentioned to you a few minutes ago how the earthquake in Ottawa back in June a couple of years ago took quite a bit of time to get out. It took actually over an hour to get the message out in both languages because of the time of day that it caught us. People were at home watching the 6 o'clock news knowing it had been an earthquake, and finally the official government of Canada notice went out saying that that was an earthquake you felt a couple hours ago in both languages. We've got to do better than that, and we certainly can and are doing that now. I'd now like to turn over to reviewing what the so-called 3 pillars of situational awareness as defined by Dr. Micah Ensley. Dr. Ensley contends that situational awareness is about perception, comprehension, and projection, which is to say, what is happening, why do I care, and what do I do about it? We believe MACES currently is very much aimed at enabling just that first pillar. However, there are a number of possibilities emerging now that we have that flow of what is happening now information that is starting to feed into a variety of developments that will enhance comprehension and projection. And that's where a community like the one here with the academics in the room, if you look at what MESIS is providing, we're providing this really rich, authoritative, real-time information source that's very easy to work with. Start to think about the analytical tools you can develop, some of the training tools where you can replay prior incidents and look at patterns that should have been indicators to taking different action. Think about tools that can monitor that feed and give you a heads up that, hey, this flood happened 5 times in the last 50 years, and we see the same pattern happening. Watch out for such and such to happen next. Imagine tools that look for patterns and indicators that automate response. The city of Sarnia is upriver from the county of St. Clair on the U.S. side, who have water intake ducts in the river. Whenever there is a refinery accident, what ends up happening is a daisy chain of 5 or 6 phone calls have to happen from the city to the province and across the state and down, hopefully to get to the guy that has the switch that turns the water intake duct off on the U.S. side so they don't have to flush their systems. Very simple to put in a system that says anytime any kind of an event happens in Sarnia, shut that water filter, that water intake duct down automatically. It's easy to open it. It doesn't cause any damage shutting it off or on. Huge damage if we don't do it quickly enough. Solar flare is another example. Automate some of the protective postures you need to take based on the criteria that are defined by that alert message. So in fact, what we see is MESIS is providing this underlying information exchange service, and this is why you'll see us referring to it as MESIS X. We see MESIS in the longer term supporting all 3 pillars, but right now we're focusing on the information exchange. X is not for experimental. That was, I guess, a mistake when we picked the name because people think that we're still experimental. It's for MESIS information exchange. This slide now indicates how we see information flows in MESIS, and I'll see if this clip works here. A first responder may encounter an incident, say an explosion in downtown Toronto, for example. He then sends the information into MESIS, which is received in the MESIS hub. The MESIS hub repackages the information and makes it available to all stakeholders. At this point, many people looking at MESIS realize that there may be a lot of information flowing towards them. Some will have set filters. If you're in downtown, if you're the Federal Government Operations Center in Ottawa, you're not going to be looking at every minor incident. But an explosion, maybe, certainly if it's on Bay Street, certainly if it's a large severity scale on the cap alert, you'll start to get feds waking up to something is happening in downtown Toronto.